Lakeland Public Television presents Currents with host Ray Gildow. Sponsored by Nisswa Tax Service, offering tax preparation for individuals and businesses across from the City Hall in Nisswa and on the web at nisswatax.com.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Lakeland Currents, where tonight we're talking about business transition planning, a topic I think you're going to find really amazing because it's something I've certainly never thought about before. And when you hear of this statistic, 60% of the businesses in the country are going to be changing ownership in the next 10 years, either by design or by not having a design. And you can see if they didn't have a design for that, it could be a pretty tragic situation possibly. So my guests tonight are a panel of three from three different organizations who are working in this particular area to help people understand the importance of a transition plan and helping them put together transition plans for this when it happens. My first, to my right, is Dick Jordan, who is the branch manager for SCORE, and we'll come back and talk about what SCORE is for a minute, in a minute. Dan Frank is with the Initiative Foundation. He is a Community and Economic Development Coordinator. And Peter Nelson is with the Small Business Development Center at Central Lakes College. He's kind of an independent contractor. Is that the correct way to say it?
Yes, it is.
Well, welcome to the show. And until you tipped me off of the importance of what's coming up, Peter, I've never heard of this concept. So I think it's really something that our viewers will find. And I have to say before we get started, I have two friends who found themselves in a position of getting ready to retire and couldn't find somebody to take over their business. And it was a lifelong business with a pretty good volume, and not just an ordinary person could walk in and take it over. So I've seen firsthand what happens if you do go through this process and you're not prepared to deal with it. Well, so maybe we could start out by just identifying the organizations that you're from, and then we can talk a little bit about what the project is here for. But maybe, Dick, we could start with SCORE.
Sure. SCORE is an organization. We partner with the Small Business Administration, and our commitment...
Is that federal?
Yes, it is. And we're funded by the Congress. And what we do, we're mostly chief executive or major executives or business owners, most of us retired, and our commitment is to volunteer and work with small businesses to make them grow and make them healthier. And I focus in the Brainerd area because we want the businesses to stay here.
And what kind of a business were you in before you got
I owned a packaging company in Aiken.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'd gone through up chairs in major corporations. I've been in several different industries.
Okay. And Dan, how about your organization? And what's your connection to this?
Yeah, I'm with the Initiative Foundation out of Little Falls. We are a regional nonprofit foundation. And one of the areas, of course, we have very big concern in and across central Minnesota with 162 communities are businesses. And of course, as well as nonprofits. But my own work actually involves working with small towns across central Minnesota. And of course, small town businesses, Main Street businesses are a great concern to us.
Peter, how do you fit into this picture? You're with a small business development center, and you're one of 9
Yes,
centers.
there are 9 small business development centers across the state of Minnesota.
And I think most of them are attached to a college, are
yes,
they not?
most are they all are attached somehow to a college. And for us, we are attached to the Central Lakes College. And I work there as an independent contractor, as a business consultant. And usually we are working on business plans or marketing or financing or strategic planning, sometimes intellectual property. So there's a variety of subjects that there is staff on board to help all of these small businesses. We serve about 400 businesses a year, and we are really grateful that Central Lakes College hosts us and supports us because we are entirely grant funded. And so this topic kind of came up, or the importance of it kind of came up from our standpoint, is we would, when we put together projections and loan packages, we very often are analyzing the seller's business. And sometimes they are just not positioned to sell. And if they would have been positioned to sell, in other words, the owner would have prepped that business so that it became more obvious within their financials and so forth what the value is there, these become much easier to sell, and the buyer is much more likely to actually get financing for these businesses. So we had kind of a unique perspective on this, and realized what a dilemma this is becoming for the region.
I was going to say one thing that people might not realize, that a lot of financial institutions will not give loans out to small businesses starting up unless they've gone through an organization like yours that puts together business plans and help them have the potential for success before they just go out and do something.
Yes, we work actively within the banking community, and we have many bankers that refer small businesses to us, just so that they, and it's, we find it interesting in that the bankers like to think that the business plan has been vetted, and so it has a higher degree of success, not a guarantee of success, but certainly someone with business skills and financial analysis capabilities has looked at it to try and assure that the likelihood of success is good.
And I know, I think probably we're thinking small business, but I do know that your particular office has worked with some very large businesses too in putting together business plans and loan packages, and I'm sure it has helped some of those places become very successful.
Well, we have. When we say small, it depends on whose definition of small.
Right.
But certainly in this area there are many, many employers, and some have dozens or 50 or 100 employees, and others that we work with are all the way from a startup to a handful of employees. But the key thing, and the reason we're all concerned about this, especially the Initiative Foundation, is that even though these are small businesses with a handful of jobs, their people's families are being supported from these jobs. And so what we really don't want to see, I think Dan has described it really well, is the rippling effect of a business going away.
Absolutely. We first got into interest on this as I go across and work in communities in central Minnesota. And as you guys know, Ray, you're from this area. Most of our towns are pretty small. And so, if you're a really big business, whatever that definition is, and I think federally it's like 500 employees or more. Right. But if you're really a big business, you probably have the money to go out there and afford to pay for an expensive transition plan. And of course, there's enough money involved where people are interested in that. And that's important. We want to keep big businesses in our communities. But most of our communities don't have businesses that big. But my concern as a person and a practitioner who works with small towns, I'm concerned about things like the local grocery store, the hardware store, the service business that takes care of people's cars, these small businesses that if we lose those, it can have a rippling effect, as Pete said, in the community. You lose a key hardware store on a key corner in your small town. Well, all of a sudden, if somebody doesn't need to come to town to get some hardware, then they're going to another town to get the hardware. And then as long as they're in the other town to get that hardware, well, maybe I'll pick up my groceries too, since I'm here. So it can have a rippling effect. And when a community loses a small business, first of all, you lose that tax capacity. That business is now empty, and you can't tax that at a rate that is going to bring in much money to your community. So that's a loss. Second of all, of course, you lose services to your people. And so you have people less involved in their community. And then thirdly, you're losing the leadership. If you look at most of our small towns, many of our leaders are small town business owners. They volunteer, they get involved in the community, they're on the city council, they're involved in so many things. So you lose that. And then finally, you lose the opportunity for another young family to come into your community and run that business and have an opportunity to be a business owner. So those things are really key to us, and that's one reason why we got involved with these two guys and these two organizations to say, okay, what can we do to help small businesses make a successful transition so that at the end of the day, the guy who sold is better off and he's ready to retire. Yeah. He can afford to, okay? And the new person coming in has a business that they have a shot at making successful. And again, at the end of the day, the community can continue to move forward and be successful as well. So those things are really important.
So when we say in 10 years there will be a 60% turnover, are we talking Minnesota with those statistics or nationally?
That's nationally.
And I would suspect that's tied into the baby boomer changes.
It is very much. And one of the things we notice if we go around to chamber meetings, and I bet you guys have noticed it too, there's a lot of people that look like me and Dick at chamber meetings with gray hair, a little bit older.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy cow, you know, a lot of them own these businesses. People in my own community recently went through, in the hardware store, went through a business transition with the folks finally being completely out of the business. And I remember thinking, great, that great hardware store is going to keep going. They've made the transition. Well, then I looked at the people running it today and I thought, they're in their early 60s. They got to start thinking about transition.
Wow.
So it's ongoing, but we're going to see a lot of it, and they need to be successful for everybody concerned.
I would have guessed that part of your challenge is to make people aware that this is what they got to be thinking about, because they probably don't have that.
Every
in the
business
back.
is going to have an exit experience.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the game. And the disadvantage that the small companies have is they don't have a staff. The big companies can train people and there's people to select from. You don't have that in a small business. It's basically the one owner or pair of owners, and they've got their culture and they're running along. They're not training anybody. And experience tells us it's hard to bring somebody from a big company into a small company. The big company people are used to what they call silos. I'm in marketing, I'm in production, I'm in research. And it's tough for them to come down and come into a small company and take that culture of that company. And they don't have the vision of how to run a company with, with these challenges of the small business.
So if I own a bakery in a town of 1,200, what do you do when you come and talk to me? How do you help me?
Well, we first ask, what do you really want to do? What is your plan? If you're going to get out, what are the options of selling the business? But more, as the owner, how are you going to pay for the rest of your life? You've got that budget to think. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? What do you want to do with this business? Is it a family going to come in? Are you going to sell to a competitor? Are you, there are options. And the best is not to go down to the bottom where you're liquidating or shutting down. You're better off keeping it as a going business. And we have the experience, all of us, to mentor those people and to help them go through that, first to keep their business working properly, but to coach them how to bring in the other professionals as they move forward in their transition.
So are you folks focusing on Region 5 for the most part in your project, or are you all over?
Oh, for us, with Initiative Foundation, we cover 14 counties, so we're bigger than just Region 5. This pilot program that Pete and Dick and CLC and the small business centers involved in, I think pretty much covers most of central Minnesota, or at least you're open to that.
We are in central Minnesota, and I think the lessons, our Small Business Development Center here in Brainerd, working together with SCORE, the lessons learned here we're looking to replicate around the state.
That's our hope, really, Ray, is that at the end of the day, what we learn here, what these guys learn here, because they're doing the work and carrying the water, that this can be replicated by other small business development centers. And there's other players in the game too that are doing this kind of work. But we've noted that there's just not enough of them to serve all the need. And that's why we're excited to see what we think is a very natural fit for SCORE and the small business centers to get involved in this issue.
So this pilot project you're on is involving basically your 3 organizations at this stage?
Yes.
And then do you have a website or something, or how would people contact you if they watched this show and decided they would like to be involved? What do they need to do?
Well, we have a website and we have a local SCORE phone number.
What is your website called?
SCORE.org.
SCORE.org. So that would be the main conduit to get through it, to get into the program.
Yes.
That's one of the areas, and of course the other thing is to contact the Small Business Development Center. Certainly in Brainerd Baxter area, and they have a process, and I'm sure they have a website as well.
We have a website, and we're really easy to find. If you start Googling, you can Google Small Business Development Center CLC business.
Where's
and it'll be you'll get led to our office.
Is the next closest small business development center St. Cloud?
St. Cloud.
Okay.
And there's a down in the southeast there's a center. Southwest there's a center. Duluth has a center, and so they're scattered around the.
So when you are working with these businesses, when do you tell them to start really getting serious about this? How much time between now and when?
I think that's a really good question because
10 years.
First day.
Well, that's true too. When you put your business plan together, you better have an exit part of it.
Yeah.
Because it can happen, as Pete said earlier, it can happen anytime. And for a lot of
Health-wise,
different reasons.
yeah.
Lying,
Sure.
people steal from you, accidents. You know, we experienced that in this area not too long ago, and with a major company. And
But I think in general, if I remember right from what you guys have said, that probably at a minimum you need a good 5-year
Yeah.
lead time, and a little
At
more
least
than that is
5.
probably a good thing because there's a lot of things to look at in terms of getting your business ready. And Pete could speak more about that.
I think that as you manage and operate a company, there's a strategic mindset shift that takes place. When you're growing, first in business, you're looking at growing, you're looking at profits, you're reinvesting, you're trying to minimize taxes and so forth. And then as you start thinking about exiting a business, and the key here is to really optimize the exit.
yes.
That's right.
And so when you optimize the exit, now you have a different kind of bias to how you manage and do your accounting and so forth. And so it's terrific if someone can think about selling their business, having a planned exit, and in this planned exit, they actually develop a strategy, and we work with them to develop this strategy and how do they position and how do they hire, do they have key employees, of all kinds of issues, and along the way, certainly there are CPAs involved. There's legal issues that come up. There's family issues, sibling equity that comes up. Wealth preservation,
Financial planning.
there's a number of really specialty areas that we would advise to bring in at the appropriate times and work through those kinds of details. But the key is to start from a pretty overarching kind of strategy is how are you going to, what we keep saying, optimize this exit. Now, even though we talk about optimizing the exit, we also think that there is plenty of room for a business owner to talk about or to consider the unplanned exit. And we talk about the 7 Ds. Well, what about death, disability, divorce, disagreement with your partner, dishonesty? What if you're disabled? What if you're depressed? You can't function. So there are all kinds of issues, and usually, but those kinds of things, a lot of times you can address those within the bylaws of the corporation, and you can actually have some sort of planned outcome, or at least how to deal with these.
I saw an ad in the paper in an area where I live, not in the community I live in, but a community nearby. Someone was selling their business, and it was a shop, and all the equipment in the shop were going to be auctioned off. And I'm thinking, this guy's going to lose his butt, or this family, because they're going to get so many pennies on the dollar, I would guess.
That's
Well,
right.
this is a business kind of liquidation, and certainly that might be your plan to exit, but I wouldn't necessarily put it in the optimized category.
For sure. It's one of the
So
lower returns.
you'd want to start planning before you're in that situation that you're going to just sell equipment.
Right. If you're just selling equipment and then you're ending up with an empty building that you're probably also going to have a hard time selling without a business in it, a going concern, it's going to make retirement kind of tough for most of us unless they were very fortunate during their business years. And of course, again, from my bias, looking at the community, that's the worst outcome. An empty building with equipment
the
being sold
business.
out, when in fact, if that going business could continue, even though a new person coming in might make significant changes to that business, and maybe those changes are needed, if they have a place to start, that's much better, I think, in most cases.
Way better
but You should
situation.
have it
Yeah.
written too.
That's right.
So you get rid of the arguments within the family or within the employees or whatever the relationships are. It should be in writing, and it should be almost from day one if it's a partnership or
It should be.
Going forward, it can hurt you if you don't. Because I worked with one where there were 3 people, and they supposedly had an agreement. It wasn't where it should be, and there's a big fight, and friendships got lost.
Yeah,
And that's a shame.
I was working with a recent client who came in and said, I really would like to buy out my partner, and of course my response is that, well, show me the documents that describe all of this. Well, there's absolutely nothing. So at the point that you are actively in the process, isn't the time to decide by what rules will we have this take place?
One of the previous shows that we did this fall was the pending housing issues. I don't want to call it a crisis, but with baby boomers selling homes and moving into condos and that sort of thing, there's going to be a lot of houses on the market. The demand is not going to be exceeding supply. So the value of these homes and even the value of lakeshore property probably will drop, because most lakeshore property in Minnesota is still owned by Minnesota folks. If you have this kind of transition happening in the next 10 years, where do you see all these future buyers coming from?
I think that's a really interesting observation, because I was just recently working with University of Minnesota Extension, and they have exactly the same concern, and they are right now looking at doing a study, I think, that will look at how to facilitate this so that it isn't so that it has a good outcome. And so I think you'll be hearing much more about this, because certainly this is becoming a topic that many organizations are becoming concerned about.
Get into rural Minnesota too, that's an issue. If the young people leave, you want to keep it so maybe you can give them programs that they'll stay, develop their profession, and they're there when you need them.
And I don't know, Ray, have you done, I know you've had Ben Winchester on your show. One of the other areas, and I don't know if he's done a show with you or not, he's talked about his study he's done about what he calls the brain gain.
We've had that, yes.
You've had that. And so one of the things we're telling communities and looking at with communities is the idea that Ben tells us that the statistics show that people that are in their 30s and 40s are moving back out of the city and want to come back to rural Minnesota. And I like the way Ben talks about it, because Ben talks about, it's a pretty good trade. We send off these kids right out of high school. They got no experience, they got no capital, and they have some education, but they have no college education. And we send them off, but then we're getting back people that are coming back. Most of them are college educated. They've got great experience, and many of them are bringing capital back, and they want to start businesses or buy businesses. So I think the answer to your question is that we have people who have lived in the cities. Now they've got kids, and they're saying, it was great being down here in the cities when I was young, and I thought it was the nightlife and all of that. But now I got kids. You know what? I want to live in a town like I grew up in. And they're looking to come back to rural Minnesota. And if we can have businesses that are vibrant, that these young people can come in and buy and become part of our communities. And the great thing is they're bringing kids with them that are going to go into our school systems. So I think it's a great opportunity for who may buy these businesses.
And to carry that a step further, then the question becomes, how can we facilitate that process?
That's right. And part of that's having people be prepared and their businesses being in good shape to sell and pass
Absolutely, yeah.
And having resources for them,
So,
which we can do.
is there a cost to this program when people work with you folks through this project?
It's free.
It's all free?
It's all free.
Except obviously if they have to use attorneys for
the
their...
specialized
That's
part.
different, yeah.
Sure. Our services are at no cost, but they certainly may engage other professionals that would, and there will be some cost associated with that.
So do you have a limit on how many people you can work with?
No.
I wouldn't say there's a limit, but certainly it's not an automatic thing either. There's when they express an interest, they go through a process, a fairly painless process, and would get assigned a counselor to go through this. And many times one counselor, myself for example, would engage others with a different specialty, and especially working with SCORE, because there are so many niches of knowledge that you can draw on.
because part of it's different specialties in terms of, you know, some of the pieces, like the guys have talked about, legal, the accounting, et cetera. The other part of it that SCORE does so well is they have people who have experience in those
We've been
types
there
of
and done it.
businesses.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's another
Small business
piece. So.
owners.
And you know, Ray, another piece people can look at it if they want to, and I can give you more information on it. You know, we did an IQ magazine series on this topic that talks about this in general. So if they go to our website at www.ifound.org and then look under IQ magazine, they can search that and they can find articles on business transitions, and the resources, including these guys, are listed in there, along with some others.
So if I'm a business person and I walk in, I would start with Dick,
Yeah.
for the most part, and then you would.
I
and
try to build a team and help them get the right professional help to get their total picture put together.
Wow.
Yeah.
How could anybody turn that down? That's a heck of a deal. Really, it is.
It is a good deal.
Well, they don't have anything to lose.
Right.
No.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of they're taking the time to be interested.
Yeah.
And I know we just had a hardware store sell where I live, and a younger group bought it, and it was a really nice transition because
it's great to see.
it was people coming back, like you said, to the community they grew up in, just for 30 years, some years later.
Yeah.
But it's been working very well.
It probably is one of the biggest challenges, though, is getting people to take the time to start the process.
Yeah.
And some people have told me, well, it's kind of like planning your funeral. If you start a business and you loved it, you know, do you want to talk about your funeral,
Right.
the death? It's a transition of a business.
Well,
I think some
but-
people
but
have a
over-
hard time with it.
Yeah, sure they do, but over and over, you know,
worth
we see things too where, you know, people are so active in the business that they don't have time to take a step back and
Absolutely.
work on the business. And this is working on the business, part of that kind of mindset.
Yeah, but they're also afraid to sometimes express what's going on. They're so used to holding
Yeah.
things to the chest, they don't want to share.
Keep
They're
it a
afraid to
family
share.
in the family, so
Yeah.
to
Sure.
speak.
Sure.
Well, we're out of time. It sounds like a really good program. And again, the SCORE is the website they could start from.
SCORE.org.
And that's how they would get this program going. And are you out actively recruiting people, or are you kind of waiting for them to come to you?
Well,
In
we're
10 seconds.
we don't really actively recruit people. We try and get our message out there that says we're available.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's a very fascinating program, and good luck with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we talk about what you're talking about. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.